So I assume that you can see my screen now?
Yes, perfect.
And do you see my full screen?
Yes, we see the full presentation screen.
Okay, good. In presentation mode.
Yeah, maybe you have to bring it to the slideshow mode, actually.
Okay, yeah. So that is yeah, but I let me check how to do that. What it should do, you see nothing now, right?
Yeah, still the whole tab of your presentation with your notes.
Yeah. Let me check.
Cornelius, if you want, I can share your presentation as well.
Okay, that's good. Then please do that.
Okay, I'm going to share it.
Yeah.
Do you see my screen, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go here. How about now?
That is good, I think. Okay, thank you so much, Wuxian. Yeah, I think I can start now, Parisa.
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. So thanks for inviting me, and thanks for all the people here present. So I give my my presentation the title "Speeding Up the Energy Transition," and as you may have heard already, say that speeding up the energy transition is also the theme of our 180th anniversary. Next screen. And, but it is also, and then next screen again, very much central to the IPCC report. And this is the group of people that wrote one of the most recent reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the third report on mitigation of climate change. And you see that, speeding up the energy transition is very much central to mitigation. And I'll talk a little bit more about some major findings of this report. And here you see the development of greenhouse gas emissions over the last 3 decades. And the bad news is that emissions are still increasing, also over the past decade. The good news is that the increase is a little bit less than in the decade before, but still it's increasing, and that means that we are not on track to reach very ambitious climate targets. So what you also see here is that, no, maybe the previous one, what you also see on this graph is that CO2 from fossil fuels is by far the most important source of greenhouse gas emissions, responsible for about 2/3 of the total greenhouse gas emissions. Next to that, methane is an important source, and also part of the methane emissions comes from fossil fuels. Next slide. Say this is one of the central messages, and we need to act fast to keep temperature rise limited to 1.5 degrees C. Next slide. But there is also quite some good news. Say the cost of PV, of wind energy, but also of batteries have reduced substantially over the past 2 decades, and that reduction is still continuing. Next slide. In relation to that, you also see a strong growth of the use of photovoltaic solar energy, of offshore wind energy, of onshore wind energy, but also offshore, by the way, and also the use of electric vehicles. And that growth is also, say, data are just until 2020, but that growth is continuing until this day. There is more good news. Next slide. Say there are also quite some countries that see a decrease in emissions over the past decades. And most of these countries are in the European Union. US is also one of them. So you see that mitigation action starts to work. What is also important is that there are many cities, but also companies that have already adopted zero emission targets. So they have said, okay, in 2030, 40 or 50, we want to be zero emission. So there is a lot more activity than just from national governments. Next slide. And maybe you can click to add the more information to it. And again, yeah, thank you. So what you see here is what is needed. So let me start first with the red line. That is what will be the result of the current policies. Say many countries have already implemented policies, and that will lead to a temperature increase of about 3 degrees C, a little bit more. And that's already a big step, because if I would have shown you a picture of the trend for implemented policies 5 or 10 years ago, you would still see a substantial increase of emissions. But we are already on track to stabilization of emissions. But that will lead to a temperature increase of still 3 degrees, and that's not enough. Say in the Paris Agreement, it was agreed that maximum temperature increase should be well below 2 degrees and preferably at 1.5 degrees. And that is also what science says is needed to avoid dangerous impacts. And you see what is needed for that. For 2 degrees, you see we need to go on the green line. For 1.5 degrees, we should follow the blue line. And that will lead to a very strong reduction, say by more than a quarter or more than 40% by 2030 already. So that requires very rapid reduction. If we don't do that, we may end up with on the purple trajectory, and that is still good enough for 2 degrees C if we act rapidly thereafter, but 1.5 degrees is more or less out of sight. So very rapid reductions are necessary. Please skip the following slide, and then we'll move on to the more sectoral actions. Say in this report, a lot of attention was paid to what can be done in different sectors, in energy, in agriculture and forestry, industry, buildings, transport, but we also looked at very much what can be done on the demand side of the energy system. What can be done, for example, how can people reduce their emissions, for example, at home, or by flying less, or by eating less meat. And an overview was also presented. You see that here. And here you see what can the various options contribute in 2030. Say we made a big picture, in totally about 40 actions that can be taken and that can already have a substantial impact in 8 years from now. And you see here what the major options are, and you don't only see the impact, that's the size of the bar, but you also see the costs, and that's the color of the bar. So blue options shown in blue are cheap. In fact, they have financial benefits that are larger than the costs, and the yellow ones are a bit expensive, and the red ones are more expensive. So you see, there's huge potential for wind energy and solar energy. These are, for the power system, these are just the 2 big things that we can rapidly deploy. But other options can play a role as well. Hydropower, nuclear, bioelectricity, and also there is quite some potential to reduce methane emissions from fossil fuel operations, especially from oil and gas. The second sector that we look at is agriculture and forestry. That's outside of the energy sector, but nevertheless very important. Stopping deforestation, that's the third bar in this category, is an important one, by far the most important in this category, but also reforestation and afforestation to reverse deforestation in the past is very important, but also we can use agriculture as a sink of CO2. By new practices, we can store more CO2, more carbon, I must say, in the soil. Note, as I said, we also paid attention to what we call demand side options. These are the two bottom ones in the bar, in this graph. Reduce food loss and food waste, and can help, but also more important, shift to balanced, sustainable, healthy diets in the IPCC jargon, and to put it simply, eat less meat or eat less animal products. Next slide, please. So then we go to the energy demand sectors, buildings, transport, industry. And you see there's a lot of options and they seem small, but totally they are very important. In buildings, efficient appliances, for example, are important, but also buildings with better energy performance, applying renewable energy in buildings. In transport, you see a lot of cheap options, more efficient vehicles, but also biking, which is small, but nevertheless interesting, shipping and aviation, everywhere there is possibility. The role of electric vehicles is still modest in 2030, but that is because it needs time to scale up and to replace the entire stock. But biofuels can also play a role here. For industry, we see many options. Energy efficiency is important, but I also want to pay attention to what's often called circularity options, circular economy, which has become an important buzzword in the last decades, but it can also play a role. It's not only good for reducing resource consumption and reducing waste production, but also to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And you see here material efficiency and enhanced recycling can play a role. But that all is not enough. We also need to reduce to low carbon fuels, electricity, natural gas sometimes to replace coal, bioenergy and hydrogen. And finally, also new processes may play a role. So that's a very brief overview. All this can be found in the report in more detail. The picture is in the summary for policymakers. And a lot of people in the team were involved in developing this picture. I also saw a question in the chat, what is the reference? And the reference is the policies as usual scenario. So there is already some assumption that, for instance, wind energy and solar energy will be deployed to some extent according to the current policies, but this is what can be done on top of that. So there is already some electrification of vehicles, for example, but this is what can be done on top of that. So the good news is that all these options together make it possible to reduce emissions in 2030 by at least half. So that is good, and a substantial part of that is low cost. There are a number of, this is possible, this ambitious target of reducing by more than a quarter or more than 40%. We have the technology and the options in our hands. Important ones that I would say every country should consider is wind energy, solar energy, energy efficiency, stopping deforestation, of course, only for the countries for which that's relevant, and reduction of methane emissions. And let me stress again, this is the picture for 2030. Beyond 2030, we'll see also other options. These options will be important as well, but we see new fuels like hydrogen and ammonia can play a role, new industrial processes, removing of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. There will be many more options that can play a role in the longer term. So more information, there is an interesting summary by Carbon Brief, which is always a good source for everything on climate issues. So I recommend that reading. It's still quite a read, but of course, if you want to go in more detail, you should go to the summary for policymakers of 60 pages, the technical summary, or if that's not enough for you, there is a complete report which is totally 3,000 pages. So that's a lot. There's a lot of material available. Let me stop with the final slide. The message of the IPCC report is very clear. The time for action is now. So it's very well needed that we speed up the energy transition. I want to make some final remarks. It is related to the question, okay, if we do not act rapidly, we will miss 1.5 degrees. But is anyway good to take action, even if we would do 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 degrees, that is worth pursuing. The lower we keep it, the better it is for the future of our planet. So thank you for your participation.
Thank you so much, Professor Cornelis, for your nice presentation. We will have a very short Q&A session after all of the 3 presenters will have their presentation. So I think at 12:20 we would start the Q&A session. I mean 12:20 at CET time. So now it's time for the next presenter, Christina Lee from NTU Singapore. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm Christina Lee. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Green Connect. I would like to share a few slides with you. Thank you so much, Professor, for sharing such insightful information with all the statistics in energy sector. I think the topic that I'm supposed to talk about is a woman in energy. I think, I don't really have any specific energy invention, but we are a group or community that is really pushing innovation, particularly in energy, food, and education. There are a lot of very pressing solutions that we're looking for. So maybe I'll just give you a short introduction about our group, Global Green Connect. We are a sustainability integrated platform that we provide sustainability advisory services as well as training that is more focusing on the professional and the business side. And we do work very closely with women as well as students through our social enterprise, Ggef. So I'm going to introduce, some of the initiatives that we launched in Asia that has been running for the past 9 years. And I put it together this presentation quite quickly. So there's some information might not be all comprehensive here, but you're all welcome to go to our website that is more comprehensive, on our website. So how do we see, the importance of energy transformation? I think Professor touched on something earlier about everyone's racing for the net zero. We see a lot of talk in the market, but I think we are still lack of innovation and funding going into these sectors to push for the transformation. So I think discovering new talent or new innovation is much needed. So I think this is something that we do, through Ggef. What we are promoting is the 17 SDG goals, and we run the SDG Open Hack in Singapore and numerous countries in Asia this year. We launched the SDG Open Hack last year in Singapore during COVID, but we work with all the universities and get some university students to get involved, because this is a program that we believe students will get transformed through the 24 hours working with industry experts. So we come up with various hack topics, including energy. And this year, the SDG Open Hack, in fact, we just finished, and the grand finale was Monday. And we are very pleased that we have some of the previous students came back to mentor the students, and we are going to take it to other regions. I think, when we work with corporations, it is an inspiration not only for students, but also for company. So there are a lot of the companies, they are looking for all sort of innovative solutions to tackle, whether it's building, whether it's energy directly, or even healthcare issues. Like these are the problem statements from last year, and all around the SDG goals. And we do have some teams that they came up with some very interesting, innovative solutions. And we provide the platform for them to present at the World City Summit. Some of them have gone on to the Accelerator program to further explore whether their innovative solutions can be able to materialize and launch as a startup to roll out in the marketplace. And then we also have some team that join the online summer program to work with World Health Organizations to further their learning in healthcare. So I think, if you look at a program like this, we really believe that our innovative solutions, whether it's in smart city or energy sector, will come from some of these very interesting ideas generated from the next generation. And the other things that we have been running is the Women Eco Game Changer Award. There are a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in this impact space, run by female founders. So our organization launched the award for in the region back in 2017, when there are not many focus on sustainability or ESG. So, but through this award, we discovered that a lot of entrepreneurs are using their innovative solutions to solve both environmental as well as social issues. So over the last few years, we have numerous winners that their solutions are focusing on targeting either waste or energy or food or social issues that they are still working very hard, to improve, all these environmental and social problems. And all of their solutions, or innovative solutions rather, that are really help to help our community to meet the net zero target. Here's two winners that I can point out, that the Fabric Lab, when she won the awards back in 2017, she was only focusing on sustainable fashion, but now she's already gone on to use eggshell to create building material. And the other winners, who is the Eco Social Game Changer Award, that when she won the award, she's already piloting all the solar energy in China. But now with her expansion, her coverage is already gone on to South Africa and also Southeast Asia. So we know, we see all these ladies founders that, all the businesses, and they come up with, some of them, they just repurpose what they know, and we can see that they all are making impact. So so I believe, whether it's a man or woman, I believe that innovation is the key for us to achieve a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina, for your very insightful and nice presentation and such a nice initiative. I would personally look into your website for sure. And so our final guest for today within the green economy topic is from IIT Bombay, Professor Winish Katuria. So yeah, I think you can share your screen now.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Oh, okay, fine. Thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank organizers for giving me this chance to speak on this. And the previous two speakers were more, according to me, they were looking very broadly, but I'll go very specific. I'll go into one specific sector, which is solid waste management, which has been, and how in that also I'll be going, what is the role of informal sector in helping to contribute to the circular economy. Now, till now, we all were aware that there is a waste management hierarchy in that most of the countries, they were trying to move up the hierarchy and trying to go to recycle, reuse, and reduce. And many of the developing countries, they were having a lot of issues with the solid waste management because they were just disposing, or they were having disposal which is uncontrolled. And situation is not very different, or was not very different in developed countries also. There is an interesting study which found that UN Habitat 2010, which found that in 1990 EU official studies stated that the few 6 member states were using uncontrolled disposal. And of these 6, 3 were even disposing more than half of their municipal solid waste. So it's a big problem. Now, if you talk about India, situation is not very different in many other developing countries. So India generates 72 million tons of solid waste every day. Now, how much it is collected, if you see that only 60% is collected, and how much is treated. So you can see that only 12 million ton is only treated, which means a substantial amount of solid waste, either it is dumped in a landfill without treatment, or it is not collected at all. So it's a big problem in that sense. Now, over a period of time, at 2030, we may see the projection is that it will be much more, 165 million ton per day, and by 2050, it will be 436 million ton per day. So which is a huge problem if you see that. Now, this is not specific to India. Many of the developing countries like Bangladesh or Vietnam, they are also grappling with the same problem. So they are not able to collect solid waste. And even if they are able to collect it, they are just putting in the landfill. But that's not a solution, basically, if you see that. Now, from the perspective of circular economy, solid waste management is an area where through the activities of the informal sector, they not only play a negative role, but a significant positive contributor towards the circular economy, and they mitigate the climate change effect. I have a lot of examples from different countries where informal sector has done a great job. So concept of, we know that circular economy requires that once a product is made from natural resource and used, then it has to be reused, repaired, and refurbished, and then recycled to create a closed loop. Unlike the linear approach, where the natural resources are turned into products and that are ultimately destined to become waste. But in circular economy, aim is to extend the life cycle of the materials by reusing them. And by collecting waste from households to dump sites, the informal sector has played a big role, and it intercepts the linear flow to make it more circular, which not only helps the environment to become much cleaner, but less waste is dumped in the landfill, but also generate income for these people also. Now, people will be knowing what linear economy is, that extension of resource. Then when you go to manufacturing, distribution, consumption, disposal, and then there is a depletion of finite natural resource. But circular economy is where there is you have recycle, reuse, and refurbish. Everything is there. Green economy is much bigger term, or much broader than that, because there is an interesting study by European Environment Agency, which argues that the circular economy is the core of green economy, and it extends the focus from waste and material use to human well-being and ecosystem resilience. So you can see that it is much bigger than what circular economy is. But I am concentrating more on circular economy. And because the green economy covers many other sectors, transport, power, solid waste, which the first speaker has already talked about. Now, what is the role of informal sector in that? So several developing countries like India, Thailand, Vietnam, Ghana, they are facing difficulties in finding a sustainable solution. Why? Because there is a rapid urbanization, there is a haphazard planning also, and this is very optimistic estimates, which suggest that only 30 to 70% of the refuse generated in cities are collected. Otherwise, they are not collected at all. And there is an unmanageable waste-related problem in developing countries, which is attributed to, first of all, many of the municipalities do not have budget, or budget is there, it is very short. And there is a ever rising amount of waste. After this e-culture has started, e-commerce, the quantity of waste generated has gone up drastically. So now the waste is not only increasing, but it also becoming more diverse in terms of types and difficult to handle the nature. So, and another point which is important in many of these developing countries is that capability of the solid waste management requires much to be desired in all the areas, because starting from collection to transportation to the finally treatment. And these issues are nevertheless cut across most developing countries and deprive the countries of an effective method of treating waste towards a circular economy. Now, informal sector is the one which bridges the gap in this quest towards a circular economy by collecting and recycling the material. So some example I want to give that in Vietnam, it is there are studies which have found that there is a positive effect on the environment by reducing 15 to 20% of the waste which goes to landfill. So which reduces the cost of solid waste management system, and by also providing income opportunities to the poor communities which are unable to make a living. Now, there was a study in 2011 done by an NGO called Chintan, which argued that, or which found that the 6% of India's GHG emission is from solid waste, and by recycling these waste pickers save nearly 900,000 carbon dioxide tons per annum, which is nearly 3.6 times higher than any waste project approved under CDM. So you can see they are providing a lot of value. In Brazil, data suggests that in 2008, 92% of the aluminium and 80% of the cardboard were recycled, mostly by waste pickers working outside the municipal recycling program. So informal sector is providing crucial environmental and public health services across the countries in different parts of the world. So which not only it eases pressure on landfills, incinerator and waste treatment plants, is a positive contributor to the circular economy. But what is this informal sector? If you see that, it consists of basically three broad groups. One is network of scrap collectors, second is intermediaries, and third is recycling facilities, which are factories or craft villages. And this is the network of scrap collectors. It is the one which is very prevalent in many of the developing countries, like street-based scrap and waste pickers, dump site based scrap and waste pickers, and scrap and or waste buyer who go door to door. And then street cleaning workers also, they also collect. And lastly, municipal waste collection. So all these are basically in the realm of informal waste recycling system. Now I will tell the importance of these three case studies, which I have done in the recent past. And I'll tell the importance of this informal sector, how they are helping the three different cities. One is Bangalore, near Bangalore, it's called Kolar, another is Pune, and then in New Delhi railway station, they are helping collecting the waste and then mitigating the effect of the carbon emission. You can see that. Now, if you see in a household waste collection, waste management system, there are so many nodes are there, so many people are involved. And wherever you can see the dotted line, which means that these are the informal workers, whether it's a street scrap buyers, scrap dealers, recycling facilities, and craft villages, or whether the worker or informal worker getting it through illegal dumping. So there are, you can see that the dotted line dominates in this graph or in this diagram, because they are the ones who are helping the economy towards circular economy basically. Now, as I mentioned that there are 4 or 5 categories. So there is no correct estimate available how many people are involved in informal sector, which is collecting the waste. But there are some vague estimates. They say that more than 15 million people are involved in this. And estimates suggest that they comprise nearly 1% of the city population in India. As in China, they said that which has the largest number, 3.3 to 5.6 million people involved in informal waste collection and recycling activities. There is no correct estimate of waste picker in India, because estimate vary from 1.5 million to 6 million people. So, and in Brazil, they say it is 0.3 million. So you can see that there are different studies which have tried to come up with some number, but there is no clear figure available how many people are involved in this, but this is very much clear in different studies that nearly 3 to 4% of India's GHG emissions originate from inadequate waste management. Without informal sector contribution, this number would have been much higher. Now, having stated that, there was a very interesting study done by UN Habitat in 2010, which tried to see the role of informal sector. Now, this table talks about that amount recycled by the informal sector forms nearly 31% of the total waste recycled. To give a perspective, this is equivalent to nearly 7 football fields. If these are not there, then you require area equivalent to the 7 football fields to manage this waste if these people are not there. So besides having issues of managing the leaching and groundwater pollution, there is another study which has looked into what is the contribution of these informal sector. Now, one indicator which we often take is called avoided cost. So if informal workers are not there, they are not collecting the waste or picking the waste, then recycling it, then we have to either they will go to the landfill or some other, we have to incinerate that. But one way to find out what is the contribution is avoided cost. So there was an interesting study which has looked into 6 different cities, say Egypt, Peru, Philippines, India, Romania, and Zambia. And the study found that over 73,000 informal workers are working in these 6 cities, and they provided a collective benefit of $52.7 million. In the form of avoided cost for disposal. So you can see that informal sector is helping a lot, but there are 6 key issues if you want to manage solid waste management towards circular economy. First one is there is a lack of understanding of composition of waste. So still there are no studies in many countries which tell what is the composition of waste. And since composition of waste is not there, one reason is waste is not segregated at source. In many of the cities in India, though the legislation says that the households have to segregate it, but it is far from reality. And third, there is a lack of understanding of treatment technology options. And the fourth one is there is absence of any kind of charging. So you see all these are interlinked basically. And fifth one is we have different rules, but there are studies which have documented that they are not being implemented, whether it is in India or in Bangladesh or other countries. And lastly, there is no benchmarking or standardization, and performance monitoring is missing basically. I'll spend a couple of minutes on the first two because they are very important. The basically lack of understanding of composition of waste, because that's very key factor basically. Now, with increased income, urbanization, and growing penetration of e-commerce in different areas, proportion is not only changing rapidly, but also becoming more complex, making it more difficult to design an effective municipal solid waste management system. Now, for Ghana also it has been found, for Vietnam also this issue has been found by several studies. Now, a related issue in some developing countries is that availability of data about the total volume of uncollected waste, which is not available basically. So an interesting example in this context is that there was one common effluent treatment plant in very close to Delhi, which is the capital of India. But within 2 months, the effluent treatment plant had to be converted into sewage treatment plant because they did not know what is the level of inflow of influent basically. Now, quantum was also unknown, as well as the toxicity of the influent was unknown, and which resulted in a lot of wastage. So only if you talk about solid waste management, only available waste stream for Indian cities is for 2004 and 5, which was carried out by the local Federal Pollution Control Board agency, which was done for 59 cities. And there's a huge variation in what kind of waste, compostable and recyclable waste across cities. So you can see these two graphs, K density plots, which is telling, so some cities are able to have composting of 30% and some have 70%. On the other hand, recycling is 10% and 35% basically. Now, that is the first issue. Second is waste is not getting segregated at all at source. Waste segregation is very key for any. And there are 2 interesting studies I would like to mention, or 2 interesting example. One happened in Delhi, which is the capital of India, and another Lucknow, which is nearly 600 kilometers east of Delhi. So what was the issue basically? In 1984, Municipal Corporation of Delhi installed an incinerator with technical assistance from Denmark at a US dollar of 3.5 million to process 300 tons of solid waste to produce 3 megawatt of power. The plant required segregation of waste at source, which neither the residents nor the municipal corporation was accustomed to. And as a result, the plant had to be closed down within a week as the waste had a very low calorific value and a high proportion of inert materials. So composition of waste is very, very important. So another example from Lucknow, as I mentioned, the anaerobic digester installed with technical input from Austria and Singapore at a US dollar of 18 million cost. Similar results were obtained. Plant was to generate 5 megawatt of energy by processing 500 to 600 tons of waste. The plant could not operate at full capacity even for a single day. And eventually it got closed down. And these examples illustrate that any technology transferred from other countries based on the design assumptions and waste management practices of developed countries may not work in actual field scenarios in developing countries. And similar issues are there in Ghana also, because when the waste technologies were transferred from developed countries to developing countries. Another issue, as I mentioned, though there are plethora of available, no charges to flat rate, to pay as you throw, and in pay as you throw, you have frequency based on weight, based on bags per sticker and container. But in India, most cities do not have any charging facilities as such, which leads to more waste getting generated. So, but these two are important for circular economy. So two more issues are there. One is non-implementation of MSW rules. And there is a study by a comptroller and auditor general, which has found that many cities are not implementing the rules. And there is no standardization of waste management services. So these are the 6 issues. If they are taken care, then many problems, the solid waste management problem will be taken care. I'll take 3-4 more minutes to go into the 2 case studies. I will not go to the 3 case studies. One is the Kolar, and which is 60 kilometer east of Bangalore. Bangalore, we all know, is a Silicon Valley of India. And New Delhi railway station. Pune example I'll be skipping. Now, Kolar city is a very small city, which is an area of 18.3 square kilometer, a town which is 70 kilometers east of Bangalore. And beginning 2014, city with a population of 150,000 was facing the acute problem of managing its small waste, which was 64 tons per day. Municipality could not find a new dumping site because of the NIMBY, not in my backyard syndrome. No one wanted a landfill near their house. So as a result, the waste started overflowing in the streets. But what happened within 6 months? Within next 6 months, the city was declared a zero waste city and has become a model of zero waste management after the efforts of 3 government authorities: the former district commissioner, the Kolar City Municipal Corporation JE, junior engineer, and junior health inspector. So how could a city transform from a dumping yard to zero waste city? So that's very interesting, starting with generating awareness through door-to-door campaign with residents, one-to-one meetings with different stakeholders and those who are generating bulk waste, etc. And then they impose some penalties if residents were disposing unsegregated waste to induce them to segregate. It means that segregation of waste became a key factor and a necessary condition for any effective waste management system. And segregation also facilitated Kolar city to compute its waste stream. So how much waste you are generating, and what is the organic waste, what is the non-organic waste, etc. Now you can see a picture where these are called pora karmikas, or these are the workers who are collecting waste, and the modus operandi goes like that. Of the 64 tons generated every day, 1/3 is organic waste collected door to door by these PKs. Now, 2 PKs come to each street in a cart with 4 different beans for different categories of waste, and also a weighing scale. Now, weighing helps in monitoring the system and serves as a continuous waste audit of the city. And each collection point, bins are offloaded and fresh bins are placed for the next round of collection. And a municipal truck then collects waste from the collection point. Collected organic waste is composed into 5 composting yards, and remaining waste is either recyclable or inert or from bulk generator. And dry waste is sold by municipal corporation to local waste dealers, itinerant buyers, and large waste traders. All are informal workers basically. And then the inerts are sold to one entrepreneur basically. Now, and income from dry recyclable goes to PKs. So there is an incentive for them to collect that also. So entire process is managed by a group of 150 PKs who are supervised by 10 route managers and 1 health inspector, and process takes 5 hours. Now, learning from this, now one heartening point about this is that Kolar in the recent past become the only city in India where diapers and sanitary waste are collected separately by PKs, having implication for effective waste management, basically. So that is one interesting example. Now, another interesting example, I'll take 2 more minutes. So waste management in New Delhi railway station. So Delhi has 4 railway stations. One is New Delhi railway station. Now, one NGO in 2010 partnered with one organization, which was a registered association of waste pickers and Northern Railway, to handle waste from trains and platform in these 4 railway stations. And now there are 75 waste pickers who collect waste from 300 trains which come to Delhi, and nearly 0.36 million passengers who arrive through these trains. Now, waste collected is taken to a nearby material recovery facility whose land has been provided by the railways. Equipment and the charges for electricity consumption is provided by the NGO. And at this recycling facility, waste is segregated into 12 different categories such as paper, plastic, metal, glass, cardboard, etc., and then sent for recycling. You can see on the right hand side this MRF, on the left hand side the workers which are collecting waste from the trains, basically. So the wet waste amounting to roughly 1 ton is composed using organic waste composter and anaerobic pit composting, and it is sold at ₹15 per kg, which is given to the railways for free of cost. Which is valued at ₹15 per kg, but given to the railways free of cost, because the railway is providing them land for the MRF. That's why. Now, New Delhi railway station is an example of public community participation, where success of the initiative has depended on the efficacy of the informal sector in segregating the waste. Now, third case I have not talked about, but I have summarized these 3 cases. And if you see that Pune, Delhi, and Kolar, and 3 different ways of managing waste has started. In the case of Kolar, it was through government agencies. In the case of Pune, it was there was a private organization and a public partnership together. And in the case of Delhi, it's a NGO and government, so Northern Railways, together with Safai Sena. Now, what to conclude basically? So municipal solid waste is a pressing issue for most cities and is going to be much bigger problem in near future. Informal sector is key for circular economy. And there are 3 examples which demonstrate that effective solid waste management is an interplay of 2 interests. One is waste pickers' interest in upgrading their livelihood, and municipalities' interest in sustaining solid waste management. Now, a common point across the cities and these cases is that segregation at source is key, is vital for effective solid waste management. Initially, there was resistance in Kolar, there was resistance in Pune to segregate the waste, as it required behavioral change. Through use of awareness program, some persuasion, and more threat, penalties for not segregating or not picking the waste if not segregated, norms seem to have changed now in these cities. And this is similar to what Elinor Ostrom has mentioned, that we need a graduated sanctions if we want some behavioral change has to happen in the people. Now, any city can become a zero waste model, irrespective of who comes up with the initiative. In Kolar's case, 3 government officials spearheaded the initiative rather than civil society, as has been the case in several cities. And another learning from the 3 cases is that as cities grow, providing the services would require a sustainable financial model, as is the case in the Pune. Now, I'll conclude here, and I like this picture. So linear, you can see that whenever you are having a linear, so the waste is getting accumulated a lot. The moment you start recycling, the bin has less waste, but the moment you become circular, then there is hardly any waste in the bin. So I'll end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Winish Katoria, for your insightful presentation on circular economy and waste management and all of those details that you provided for us. So we're going to have a short round of Q&A session from the second topic of green economy from our second round of guests. So if anybody has any questions, they can either type it in the chat or just raise their hands and unmute themselves, or even open their camera. That would be also nice to ask their questions if they have from Professor Cornelis Block or from Christina Lee or Professor Winish Katoria.
There is one question I would like to, someone has mentioned that there are at least 20 waste to energy plants which are functioning properly with cumulative production of more than 100 megawatt. Yeah, I agree. So there was, so some plants are working, but I think given the size of the economy, of Indian economy, we need many more such plants. So I agree with that. So yeah, thank you very much, Amit.
Okay, so if no one wants to talk at the moment, I can just go to the chat. So Purnish has asked whether the climate changes steps in developing countries like India, where government awareness on plastic use, utilization of waste is not seen. Do mention the individual steps we can take to save Mother Nature, like using Ecosia search engine. I'm not sure what his question is, or maybe he can just talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, if you want to unmute yourself, because I didn't get the question, basically. Then I would like to move on to Jacob for Professor Cornelis' block. Carbon capture solutions are often touted, but based on the IPCC reports, it seems to have a tiny impact. Why might this be so? And do you think the hype on CCUs is validated? So,
yeah, thank you for the question, Jacob. Yes, in the picture that I showed, CCS and CCU only plays limited role, but that also has to do with the time frame. Say, despite the fact that already, say, for 30 years work is done on CCS, the number of actual plants is still very limited. So we are there in technology-wise in a very early stage of development. And of course, projects take time to build. So what can be done until 2030 is actually quite limited. What can be done beyond that? That is still an open question. I think CCS still has a huge potential, but also we know that CCS is a relatively expensive technology. Say it typically costs in the order of about $100 per ton of CO2 avoided. And of course, as long as there are cheaper options available, governments and companies will focus on the cheaper options. And especially in the power sector, we see now that wind and solar have become the cheaper ways to deal with it. So I do think that in the power sector, CCS will play a very limited role. But I think outside the power sector, and especially I think about large industries, it could play a role, not as the option, but as just one of the options to decarbonize at least the emissions of CO2 from existing fossil fuel consumption. So I think there still is, in the coming decades, there is potential for CCS, but it will be just one of the options.
Okay, thank you so much. Also, I see Christopher has raised his hand earlier, so you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
All right, thank you, Parisa. And thank you, Christina, Cornelis, and Vinish for the presentations. I have just two questions. The first question to Cornelis, I just wanted to follow up a bit on the slide about, I'm not sure I understood whether it was the amount of, when you said the amount of reduction. For example, I saw that hydropower was very low. So I'm wondering, is it the cost, what it would cost us if we switch to hydrogen? And that's what I wanted to get a bit of clarity on. The charts you showed in slides 12, 13, and 14. What are we, what is it saying essentially? Is it more expensive to do hydrogen, for example, than solar power? I mean, sorry, is it more expensive to do hydropower than solar power, for example, or what? And then the other question is to Vinish. You know, I do waste collection in my country myself, and I just wanted to see if there is any plasma gasification plants in India, and whether there is any data as to whether it is economically feasible, either on a city scale or on a state scale. So plasma gasification. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I can respond first. I think you were talking about the small role that hydropower plays, but hydropower is different than hydrogen. Your question is about hydrogen.
Yeah, my question is, why is hydropower safe? In the chart, it was shown as very small relative to, say, solar power, for example. So is it?
Okay. Hydropower is relatively small because many of the locations, many of the good locations are already used, and many of the remaining locations will not be used for large-scale hydropower because of all kinds of sustainability constraints. Say large-scale hydropower often has a lot of negative side effects, and that's why it was considered not an option with limited viability. And that means, of course, there can be done a lot with small hydropower, but the potential of that is a lot smaller than for large hydropower.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
So, but nevertheless, it is locally it can play a very important role.
Okay, because I'm just thinking that hydro is relatively cleaner than solar, I would say, right? Like the manufacturing, if we did solar on a large scale versus doing hydro on a large scale, I thought that solar might be.
No, but that is true. Say, of course, the equipment needed for hydropower stations is very limited compared to the huge amount of materials that are used, for instance, for photovoltaic solar energy. But you must say for the infrastructure construction for hydropower can be huge, and you must also take into account that, say, there will be a lot of local impacts, and that can even be greenhouse gas emissions. If you do not do it well, you will get, if you flood an area with water, you will get plants that go rotting and that will emit methane. So, and of course you can avoid that, but you must be very cautious not to create a lot of methane emissions, which is also a greenhouse gas. Apart from other environmental impacts, like impacts on the local hydrological cycles.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think we have in India, several states have this plasma gasification for solid waste management. Yeah, we are having, and there are statistics available basically. And some of these plants are, I think, 20 years old also. They are working and able to manage a lot of waste. So it is there.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks very much, Cornelius and Nish.
Thank you so much. There is one last question in the chat from Chan Rick to the speakers, to the three speakers. Should governments consider mobilizing populations of countries in various continents to participate in the circular economy model within regionally and globally? If so, why and how? Would it be realistically effective in the long run? So I don't know who wants to answer it.
Yeah, maybe Christina can start.
Yeah, sure. I think yes, it will be very helpful from a policy perspective, and I'm not too sure about. I think it really depends on individual countries. I mean, in Singapore case, Singapore has a green plan. So I think, definitely circular economy is something that, government would like to see. But even talking about two major countries or in terms of population in the region, like China, I think the China government is also proactively promoting circular economy for some obvious challenges like the environmental challenges as well as resources depletion. So I think this is already happening in China. And even in India, from my understanding, the government is also promoting projects that are leveraging on advanced technology to drive the country towards the circular economy. And I think those good example, especially for India's case, there's the reason why they're doing it is because there are some they can use eliminate the resources and tackle the waste problem by using those recyclable resources and waste management to generate electricity. So I think these two countries are, you can see that they are driving the circular economy maybe out of different reasons, but I think this is the ways for us to build a sustainable future. And if possible, I think all countries in the region or globally should be looking at this model. But again, I think it's very much market driven, and also government can encourage and they can put in some policy or even incentive to encourage it. But I think innovations will, end of the day, will still come out from the market and will be commercial driven, because nobody wants to drive a circular economy when you can't really, make it financially sustainable.
Okay, thank you so much. So I will just go to the last question from Sarvash. For Christina, what do you envision the future of Ggef to be? Also, what else can we do to increase interest among the students to take up entrepreneurial role to tackle sustainable development goals?
Very good questions. I envision Ggef will be driven and managed by younger generation. Because day one, since I started this social enterprise, I never had the desire to continue to run it. And I think, for me, it's more like my role. Yes, I'm a founder, but I envision myself will step back more like a facilitator, just like the SDG Open Hack that I brought to Singapore and other countries in Southeast Asia. Our goal is we also evolve, we evolve to engage young people and bring forth not only just the SDG education, but also open up more opportunities for young people to work together and look at business from a different angle. And of course, end of the day, you need to make your business financially sustainable and also look after people and planet. So I envision that we are going to bring more program similar to SDG Open Hack or alike, to expand it in the region. And I would love to see more students get involved and then drive this forward, because I don't think Ggef is a platform or a business or that we want to own and grow it, like the old business model that, oh, this is our thing. But I would rather like to see Ggef as a everybody platform that the next generation would pass on to the next generation to create impact. And always remember the core for us to be able to survive on the planet is not rely on someone else to solve the problem, but we will take on the responsibilities to tackle whether it's environment or social problems, so that we can have together, we can build a sustainable future together.
Okay, thank you so much, Christina. Just a quick notice to everyone is that you can easily scan these QR codes in order to become a member of all of these three energy clubs, because apart from many in-person and physical activities that we have, we also provide many hybrid or online sessions like this, so you don't necessarily have to be in Netherlands, India, or Singapore in order to be a member of our clubs. You're all welcome, and it's our honor to have you also within our society and our community. So yeah, if you just scan these QR codes, you can become a member through our websites, or also we are all three active on Instagram and LinkedIn, so you can just follow the events that we're going to have. And yeah, thank you. So if everybody has got their answers and there are no more questions, I think we can close this session.
Chan wants answer from other speakers too.
Yeah, I see Cornelis has answered in the chat, but maybe the other guests can also.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
observe.
fully agree with Christina. You see, solid waste management, if you see, it's a local problem, though there are global implications too. So each, I mean, you cannot wait for, as the question has been put, that do you require various to participate, mobilizing the population? See, you have to do, this is the individual country's problem, so they have to do it. And many countries are doing it. And as I mentioned, through those three cases, now we have a lot of informal sector, and their livelihood depends on, say, when they pick the waste and they recycle it. And it is providing a lot of employment as well as helping the environment. But the circular economy is, according to me, and in that some of these problems are place specific. And you have to mobilize the population. So there is no way out.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Winich-Kataria. So if there are any remaining questions, you can just type it or just unmute yourself. Otherwise, we can close the session. But also for tomorrow, we're going to have six other amazing guests from these three universities with the two topics of smart grids and also a specific topic on women in green energy, which I'm personally really looking forward to. So the timing and everything is just the same, but in tomorrow. So if you would like to follow this session in tomorrow, we would be very happy as well. And I would like to thank everyone for following us today, and also many, many thanks to our amazing guests and giving their time to us with their insightful and informative presentations on different topics of energy industry. So yeah, if there are no more questions, I'm gonna say bye for now. And see you all tomorrow again at 10 a.m. in CET time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.